So this is Anthony and Key from Gamers Command. We were going to go over the Earth Lightning deck that I was fortunate enough to be able to win the Canadian Materia Cup this past weekend. Give a little bit of insight from where it came from and some considerations.
So,
Key.
Anthony, how did you first stumble upon this deck? I don't think any people have piloted a Chark deck to success like you have, most notably in this meta where we've established a few archetypes where Knights first started to win, and then people pivoted to Unidecks, and then this is one of the last tournaments of the year. Talk to me about how you decided to take this deck to the last Materia Cup in the set.
So I actually been like a huge fan of Earth Lightning Shark since you got beaten by Sam in a LQ the same weekend that I won an LQ back when we were doing like FF6 stuff 2 years ago. But basically, I feel like the Lightning Earth variant kind of died after Ryan Chen won Nats 2 years ago with it. In the current meta, though, I started to kind of think that it may have a decent space. The reason being was that it didn't really. First of all, it's pretty dominant against Knights historically from my testing, and I had a suspicion that Knights might be a little bit prolific, being as it just had it's won two different Materia Cups already at this point. But also while it doesn't really destroy a lot of decks, it has like a win condition available to it that it can beat most decks in the meta right now. So we'll go through. I actually thankfully played most of the decks in the meta throughout the course of the weekend, either once or twice. So I can actually talk to you in like detail when we go through like what the matches were throughout the day, as far as like how the each came into play. But I decided to actually do it a little bit for fun at Toy Wiz LQ. I think like 3 weeks ago, and so this was the original list. Let me get into the images.
Yeah, I wanted
So
to ask you about that because initially when we were testing this and we thought it would be good against Knights, and but it was kind of questionable into Refia. Um, what did you see when you first took this to a LQ event? Did it perform as expected? Did you think it needed changes? Were you confident in it then to take it to a Materia Cup?
at the time, I really was hoping that the meta changes allowed me like I was hoping that certain concessions that Refia had to make by playing things like the Cecils, playing things like Free Alex, were going to diminish how devastating that matchup would be. Ironically, those are actually still decent into this deck, but I feel like losing out on like Une and things like that were more devastating for this deck than like Free Alex on a Chaos that cost me only three, or on a Man in Black or something like that. And so I was I actually didn't end up playing any Refia during the original LQ, but the biggest thing that I took away from the LQ was that this Vanille kind of stinks in the current meta, just because everything is designed to kill Yuna, and Vanille is kind of just like a casualty of war because she's a 5K that has no inherent protection. Um, but that being said, I was hoping that, kind of like you were saying, that being as Refia was such a bad matchup historically, that the innovation of including Limit Break Zidane as well as Double Hecaton would maybe be able to help me actually win the deck out war. Historically, the way that like most Refia pilots are able to beat this deck pretty handedly is by effectively milling you out by utilizing Windfire Zidane or disrupting your hand to mess up your two-piece combo utilizing Windfire Zidane. But the biggest thing for me always has been deck out, because you never really want to hit them to damage three. You need to have a lot of restraint in that matchup, and so Man in Black is really like the only reason to attack, and that kind of brought me to what you were talking about, like what was I happy with the list. So I like, oh, I really don't want to keep attacking with Man in Black perpetually, and this Vanille keeps dying, which is why I ended up switching over to the Cryle that did extreme amounts of work over the past weekend.
Yeah, let's take a look at the latest version which you took to the Materia Cup. Right off the bat, I noticed that some of the summons have changed. The deck became full art. Um, And the most notable difference is I see a random green card in the Cryals. So talk to me about Cryal and how important it is and why you didn't bring it in the first place.
So, Cryol in general is probably the best include that I did from the original list. The Basically, she serves the function of being a man in black that doesn't require attacking. Yes, you have to RFG your summon, but you can also make the claim that because you can utilize your opponent's summons as well, she actually has some niche utility even better than man in black. Um, so basically, like during semifinals or quarterfinals, I was playing against Wool Seven, and I utilized Cryo to use my opponent's Amat to prevent a dual freeze effect off of Axstar, which was very very silly, but it is she's really good in that regard, especially if you have a color fixer backup. The Yuna is probably one of the most bizarre includes that I decided to go with. So originally I was on three Sonon. The forward swap of Vanille to Cryo was easy enough. Swapping Sonon to one of the Sonons to a Yuna was something that I made the decision after playing a ridiculous number of games. And the reason why ultimately came down to I really wanted to have a summoner that was not Earth and was not Seymour. So that way, if I happened to draw the Seymour, I could search out an Earth summon still. Because the Earth summons probably have more generalized, uh, benefit for most matchups. Mist Dragon is one of the best summons still in the game. The 3 CP Hecaton has niche utility in a variety of circumstances, and 5 CP Hecaton is really, really good in the current meta. So if I drew the Seymour, it feels really bad to have to search out a copy of Rydia and a Lightning Summon, because with the exception of monsters and in niche circumstances like Yuna or Knights, search out an Ixion, it didn't really feel great. Yuna, if she's castable, which I never casted her over the course of the weekend, but she is got utility if she's casted, can recur the Lulu because it's a 2-cost summoner. And in addition to that, or Guardian,
Guardian, yeah.
and then she has the other like reactivate your backups. But if I were to have ever casted her, it would have almost certainly been for the purposes of establishing Lulu. And then she's also pitchable CP for the Wind is Zidane if I needed it, which actually is like relatively significant because being as I'm running triple backup engine, it's very likely I'm going to end up capping my backups before I drop a Tyro or a Shantoto. So it was actually a benefit because there were a few games where the Wind Zidane helped really push me in the direction of winning because my opponent started to get flustered because their deck count was getting lower than my deck count. So then they had to commit to lines that were probably not great, and then they got eaten alive by like things like Xdeath or things like Hecaton or Arc or such like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Summons, I also changed a little bit. You caught that. The biggest change was actually the only change was I put 2 of the 3 CP Ramu in, and I cut the 1 CP Ramu, and I cut 1 Kusith. Uh, Kusith, I think, is obviously like very good, but especially in a world where you have Noctis LB available, he feels like a little bit less important. It's still important that you have an offensive and a defensive burst that you can top with Seymour, which is why you'll see like the 1 copy of Odin and then 2 Kusith. But the 3 CP Ramu was an include I decided to make because in my testing, even though I didn't think it should be the case, it turned out that the hardest matchup for me by a large margin was actually Water Lightning Monsters. Like you would think that between Mist Dragon and the 1 CP Ramu and Shantoto, it would not be that bad. But the amount of surprise hasters that they were able to pull off, and the amount of like resources I would need to allot to keep killing the Moss Slashers was really annoying. So 3 CP Ramu was nice because you can kill both Moss Slasher and Witch, or you can kill Moth Slasher and Blue Worm, whatever it may be. In addition to that, this is probably the best defensive spell for Man in Black to have because if they have a 7k body, it effectively reads 4 or 3 things cannot attack because Man in Black shuts off 1. He then makes it so that 1 thing dies, and then he dulls the other thing. So I really like this card with Man in Black, so I decided to try this one instead of the 1 CP Ramu.
Yeah, I like this card too. I just wish they had a full art of this. This used to be meta back in the past, but those days are long gone, except for you.
Yeah, I think that it's still really good. The 1 CP Ramu just is like tempting because it's 1 CP and it's an EX burst and it kills a Tomos. But if you're thinking about like if that matchup is like really really painful for you, I think like being able to kill a witch off of this is also pretty beneficial. And it's I never utilized it, but you can also actually haste the mana black with this. So if you really wanted to go like a weird route where you're like, I need to kill a monster right now, and then also have access to this immediately afterwards, you can haste it, kill a monster, swing, get it back, and then have it locked and loaded for the next round.
Yeah, I think it's also an important meta call at the same time because we kind of predicted there weren't going to be too many monsters in the room based off of how monsters kind of fell off in terms of popularity lately. I know the last two Materia Cups, there were barely any monster decks in representation for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I think because of that trend, the 2 CP EX ROM kind of also lost a little bit of luster there.
Like if my only goal is to kill a Laswell, I have so many other ways to kill a Laswell in this deck more efficiently probably than having a 1 CP Ramu. So I agree with you. I think that having like being okay, I can't completely forego all monster hate altogether, but let's make this a little bit more like generally helpful. So like if you watched when I played against Wool 7, when I determined that like I was trying to enter like the end board state, I recurred this summon off of Man in Black because I was like he'll never be able to attack ever again as long as I have this Ramu available. So that's like kind of one of the ways that I thought to handle some of the more aggressive matchups in the late game.
Okay, cool. And let's take a look at the backup line. Unless you want to cover anything else in the summons.
No, I think the sums are pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to argue with 3 Ixion and 3 Mist Dragon and double Hecaton in the current meta. And obviously, you go on like 3 Arc. I know that like Ghoul finds it like a cardinal sin to go less than 3 and 3 if you're going to play Chaos Arc. And after enough testing, I think I agree actually.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you had too many dark cards, you could always pitch it using Lulu. Well, at least, you know, the summons. You can still pitch them
yeah,
for like 5k. It's not totally dead.
Yeah, honestly, the like if I drew chaos because of the current meta, like we talked about, we didn't really allude to that much earlier, but because the meta went to a state where there's very few mono decks anymore. Even if I draw chaos, he's not really dead because I kind of want to play him. And then like if they always everyone always wants to kill the chaos immediately because they don't want to get arced. So if I draw multiple chaoses, to me that just means okay, I can steal multiple of my opponent's forwards. It's like a little inconvenient to do the math, but having multiple chaoses in hand is not as bad as it used to be when there were like more mono decks running around, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
The backups though, I think are also like one of the reasons I like the color combination. The curve, because of the number of like really relevant backup searchers, is really good. So the two most relevant backup searchers for the current meta are Reeve and Ridio. Reeve just is the fact that you can search out Vincent is extremely good, being as there's so many like 5K things you need to kill. But Rydia is really the reason why this deck actually functions because of the toolboxness, like how toolboxy all the summons are. So, Reeve into Vincent or the 1 copy of Kate Sith. I've had a lot of people like kind of confused to why I ran Kate Sith because there's really not that many 2 drops that you really want to play off of it. But the counterpoint I make with it is that if you draw Reeve and any of your other backup searchers, every backup that gets searched is always a 2 drop. So you just basically hold the you play the other backup searcher first, and then you get the 2 drop, and then you play Reeve and you get the Kate Sith to play it on curve. Um, Kate Sith's break utility is very niche, but is capable of being beneficial. Like I was able to do a play in the LQ where I blocked a Genova synthesis with Sonon. Sonon died. He then swang with Ingus. I cracked Kate Sith to recur the Sonon, replayed Sonon, shrunk the Genova synthesis, and then buffed Sonon and blocked to do like a 2-for-1 trade, which is super expensive, but it can get there and it's really cheeky and something that's a little bit hard to play around. And also, you can break this to recur Vincent himself because it's just his character. So like when you just need a 5K ping, it is like a nice on demand kind of thing. Um,
Yeah,
Rydia,
the
I'm sorry.
Sonon thing is something that I think when you're about to lose or determining the game, that's something you have to do. You'll do it. You'll be happy to have still have action instead of dead backup. So I think that interaction is really cool.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my dog just barked. But yeah, the Jet, come here, buddy. But yeah, so the other thing that was nice with Sonon is that, like you were saying, Sonon's like remove effect is not great in a control matchup, but when you need him, you need him. And so like my opponent played the Lena like, in the Wool 7 list, and I Sononed in just so that way I could Famford the Sonon instead of my one X deck that was carrying the whole game.
Right.
um, but Rydia, like I said, she kind of really is like the most important backup in the deck. Seymour is a really good way to handle knights to put them in an unfavorable situation by either putting Odin or Kusith on top of your deck. Sometimes, like ironically, you kind of just want to fail to find if you're drawing dead otherwise, so that way you can improve your chances of drawing into backups. But I've only done that very few times. The game plan for basically every matchup is dictated by the Rydia searches. So if you're playing against what's it called, like Refia, you're going to search out Hecaton Seymour, play Seymour, put Hecaton on top of your deck, and try to loop the Hecaton over and over and over again to ruin their life until Xeth can come on later on to kind of seal the deal. And they spend, being it's all their backup, basically draw cards that, besides like Kryl and the 2 drops that you can't break, they start to mill themselves out slowly but steadily. So you get kind of ahead in the deck count war. Against like knights, you're going to usually search out Mist Dragon to prevent Rams from resolving, and then you'll play Seymour to put an Odin on top of your deck to prevent them from wanting to attack favorably. And then against Yuna, you usually will search out Hecaton and Seymour, and then you'll play Seymour and put a Ixion on top of your deck. So that way you can try to force them into a situation where they want to crack the Cecil. But then you can utilize the other summon while the Cecil is like removed from the game before he gets replayed to try to basically kill their board.
Is there any situation where you would ever pick Seymour and Arc or Rydia Arc, any combination of Arc?
I did it only a few times. The problem with it is that unless Chaos is already on the field, you extremely advertise what's in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, advertising you have double dark cards in your hand. Like, if you, in the certain matchups, it's like, okay, I advertise it, they're screwed no matter what, whether or not they know they're screwed about it. But it's like a little bit like hard to do. I have searched out Arc, but I've only ever done it actually with Chaos on the field. Having an early Chaos and Arc can be good in certain matchups, especially Yuna, because if they get like the nut draw of like Rosa Cecil, Yuna, and they have all of them on the field, and you can play Chaos for 5, then pay like the tax to try to steal something. If they crack and you can respond by arcing the Rosa, if they have to, depending upon how their hand is at that time, if they don't have many cards in hand, they may not have something to afford to free play off of Green Cecil, and then they would either have to fail to find, which sucks, or they would find the Green Cecil and then they would give you the Green Cecil because you can't take the unit, which is even worse. So I like there are situations where it's not bad, but it is extremely advertised what's going on in your hand. If that makes sense.
Yep.
I think that the limit break is probably like where we should hop to next. It's the limit break. I was all over the place. There's like 5 cards that are essential, and then the last like 2, or actually no, 6 of them I think are essential. The last 2 are a little bit up to be determined. Cloud, Chantoto, Lightning, Leela, one Zidane, and Noctis I think are all mandatory for the list. The last 2, which I picked for Aiko and Gilgamesh, I think can be a little bit more up to debate. Aiko being an LB3 really sucks because you're almost always going to be clouding and then probably either Noctising or lightning during the game. So Aiko really doesn't fit in well with her numbers. Um, but it's nice to be able to have that threat in like the mid game if you're drawing kind of dead and you have a crap load of summons already. I have like a list of like considerations that I was thinking about putting in instead, and I have some like things that I. Oh, and then the Gilgamesh I wanted to put in for specifically water lightning monsters. It never came up relevant because I never played water lightning monsters, but I thought if I, being as I have the 3 CP Romulo, I don't need the Shantoto every board. So I was like, if I see double torpedo lightning, it might just still be beneficial to just cast Gilgamesh and remove them so I don't have to deal with them later.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go over here to like the considerations I was planning for the deck because I think that this is actually a little bit more is pretty interesting. So these are the cards that I was thinking might actually be like have a home in the deck. Uh, for forwards, obviously this Vanille is good. It's just like I said, she has incidental death to the unit, like things that kill Yuna. And then similarly, a third Sonon and a third Exeth are always things like to consider. Exeth is like a finisher, so he reminds me kind of like Ferris and Refia, where you don't really want to see him at the very beginning of the game, but in the late game he can end it. So I think two is appropriate. I mean, like if you look at the Refia list, she's frequently at two as well, though she is more searchable than Exeth. So that the fact that Exeth is less searchable besides Tyro is the sole reason why I think you might consider a third Exeth. And then this is my favorite line that I didn't end up playing that you know about, Key, because I did it to you once. the the stupid thing. So originally, so this Lin, I think, separate from the Sarah, I think is also something to consider putting in instead of the Yuna. She's effectively Man in Black. The biggest issue with her was that she kept milling me, so I was losing like deck out battles for her. She's really good, but if you're losing the deck out, it really sucks. So like you simultaneously want to get rid of her, but you also really don't because it's nice to draw 3 cards per turn. So like it's a little conflicted in that way. The big reason I really thought it was very, very funny was that off of Rydia, it gave you access to do a very cheesy line where you could play Rydia turn one, search out Len and a lightning summon, and then turn two, pitch the lightning summon and any card for lightning LB, get back the lightning summon, tap Rydia, pitch Len and whatever else for Snow, search out Sarah, and then pitch the lightning summon for Sarah to get the combo online immediately. The problem was that Alex Hancock's list plays 4-color wool, and your list plays free Alex, which kills Snow and Theodore. So it ended up being a terrible line. But it was very funny. And the one game that I beat you in practice, where you were not prepared for it, was very funny before you immediately figured out how to answer it.
Yeah, I think that kind of combo probably would have worked in like a previous Materia Cup where we were still on, water, earth Una decks where they weren't
Yeah.
running 4-color wool and most of their Vikings and small guys would just melt to a 5k shrink. But in the current meta where it's evolving, where Galuf and some of the other things that pump kind of makes it a little bit harder to make it work. But the other problem is that Snow is just 5k, and Lightning is also 5k, right? So any wool pings will finish them off. So yeah.
Issue. Honestly, I was actually considering because the deck allocation for it is pretty low. Like I said, there's a few flex spots in the limit break, so I was like, okay, one spot for Snow is not that big of a deal, and then instead of one spot for Sarah, and then theoretically, if this is able to solo Yuna, which it very much so is not, but if it was, I could cut one of the 3 Ixions for Sarah. It was like very little deck allocation to accomplish what it wanted to do. But if you were able to interact with it at all, I instantly lost because I'm playing a control deck and I all of a sudden took an aggro approach. So it doesn't really work. Um, Summons wise, the only other so I talked a little bit at 1CP Ramu. The only other thing to consider is this Fenrir. I'm pretty low on this recommendation, but it is got niche benefit. So first of all, I can play Kryl, which is immediately good. And then the other reason why I was thinking about this was because it gave you access to searchable monster hate in both colors. So that way you could search it off of Rydia and then top deck like 3CP Ramu or something with the Seymour. It never really was that good. I think I played it against you once and it didn't do much.
Yeah, it could be relevant if monsters were more popular, but NA just rejects monsters except our team, so
Yeah. And then for backups, I think that the most cuttable of the backup engine is probably the mannequins. I do like them, but if you were to cut them, things that I would include, especially if you're not on the other Vanille, this Vanille is amazing. Um, just for the tax purposes alone. The Gestal is like a classic filter card for Chaos Arc. I just chose to go with Chadley instead because I really needed to see like Ixion when I needed to see it, but this is obviously also really good. And then this is one of our teammates' favorite like arc cards, which I don't even think I know how to pronounce the name, but it
Ajido
is
Marujido.
a Jido Marujido. But it casts Arc for free per hand, and it recurs 2 summons. And being as summons are the reason to run the deck, I think that this thing could be good. And then for limit breaks, like I said, the snow. If you're on Len, you can run Shuyin, which I was actually up until like an hour before the Materia Cup thinking about doing Len Shuyin instead of Yuna. But paying 7 to get a dark card out of the deck usually felt horrible. Like you can make the claim like, oh, okay, when you really need chaos, you really need chaos, but it felt really bad. So I just chose to not go that route. And then I think that having an extra cloud or an extra Noctis would be my next go-to. Mont, I've seen a lot. Like I saw in chat people being like, "Oh, just Mont and then attack." Like that's not bad, but I also don't think I ever almost want to attack because it's like so control until I've already won. Um, it's kind of like Yuna in that regards, except it doesn't feel as toxic early on.
Yeah, nowadays it seems like you just want to wrestle for the board state rather than attacking for no arbitrary reason. Because EX bursts are so random and they could tilt the game in another player's favor so quickly, you almost never want to attack with this deck in particular because you have your X Death, uh, removing a guy every turn. Like, who cares, right? As long as they end up with nothing on the board, then you're just going to win by default. And that kind of happened more often than not. I was watching the stream back when you were playing against Bryn, and yeah, it just he ended up with like nothing and he just scooped because he knew he had no way to come back. He
Yeah,
didn't
I
even need
think
to
that
attack.
over the course of the weekend, uh, so I'll go through the games, but I think that every single game ended up with no cards in deck, no cards in hand, no cards in field. The only, or they had conceded prior because they knew that it was going in that direction, which is reasonable. So I'll go through the I think I'll go through quickly. I don't feel like keeping everyone for too long, and I don't think we need to go through the YouTube videos because that would take hours. But round one, I played against Scions, and I actually lost my round one of the day. I think that Scions generally should be demolished by this deck, but I drew really dead in the late game. Like I drew for my last 2 turns. I think like a um I actually don't remember what. Oh, sorry. Jet, buddy, come here. One of them was like a dead summon, and then a Tyro, a Yuna, and another Tyro. So I literally couldn't do anything because I was also out of LB. So he ended up winning it.
All right. So what was your round two opponent?
Two, I played against a Warriors deck. So he ended up keeping a hand that was basically just a backup and a Mog. So, and he won the dice roll. So I don't think it's necessarily like a bad matchup or a bad hand to keep right off the bat. So he ended up playing a backup. Then he passed. I played Reeve, which I think was like the most unfortunate for him because then once he played the Mog, he basically got no benefit from it. Um, or I can't remember exactly how it was. I may have played a different backup and I just had Vincent in hand, so he didn't know. But but yeah, so basically he kind of started to fall behind because he never ended up finding Tyvis, and he was also playing like a hybrid Earth included warrior list. So XF became super, or Chaos became super cheap, and it kind of stumbled out of control.
Oh
Um,
wait, you're on the wrong deck list.
oh, sorry about that. Um, round three, I played against Knights, which is probably the best matchup for the entire deck. My opponent kept a Laswell only hand, which is like usually good, but then I turn one Reeved for Vincent, so then he felt really awkward about it. So he played Garland, and then I Viridian to Seymour to put Odin on top of my deck, and then he was like, "Ah, I still don't want to attack because I have I paid 4 CP for this Garland." So he passed back to me. He just developed 3 backups, and then it kind of got out of hand because I was able to use a hell of a lot more with 3 backups than he was able to utilize with 3 backups. And at one point or another, I ended up like he cast Ifrit to kill a man in black, and then I stole it with Chaos. And once I stole his Ifrit with Chaos, it became completely game over. Um, Generally speaking, Knights is what I would say is probably by a large margin the best matchup for this deck. I think that you and I like ran stats, and I was at like over an 80% win rate on Knights or against Knights, something like that. Um, Next two rounds were the bane of my existence, which were double mono earth. But basically, as you were kind of talking about the Mike against Mike, I did the same thing against both of them, which was uh, keep delaying the inevitable until XF was able to eat their entire board. The funny thing with mono earth is that it has like this like debate that the player has to make is like, do I Leo Wool because it's like the best thing my deck can do, but then chaos becomes 3 as opposed to 9, or do I just keep developing like a big ass board and then I get Chantotoed? So it was kind of funny watching both of the players really come to terms with that. And then Mike got screwed a little bit because he ended up he included like a lot of like water summons and like fire summons like Amon Lev 6, and it ended up screwing him up because at one point he had to overpay for a Kusith, because he drew Kusith and Leviathan, because he tried to Kusith back a Warrior of Light while he had Leo on the field. But then I had Hecaton in hand, so I broke one of his 4 remaining up backups, and was able to prevent him from casting Wool. So it kind of got really unfortunate.
Oh yeah, about that match. At one point he had a Ingus search. After you had attacked, I believe he was on 5 backups, and you had Chaos and Cryle on the field. And I saw in chat somebody said that um, I should probably search for Genova Synthesis right now and just wipe his board. But he chose to search something else. Knowing that as an option, did you have like a Hecaton in hand in case he tried to 8K your board? Because Genova's resolving for 8K needs to have 5 backups on the field. And if you Hecaton just break one, he'll just do 4. Did you consider that at all?
The later game. When I first swang, it was a misplay, to be quite honest. It actually ended up being to my benefit, but my thought process was I actually think, if I recall correctly, the board said I only had Chaos on the field at the time. And the reason why I swang was because in my mind, I was behind I'm pretty confident I was behind in deck count at the time. And in addition to that, the way my brain was thinking, I was like, this chaos should die like an easy, like without any difficulty whatsoever into Earth. Because if you just get a single Emmet, you Emmet into Ingus, and then he's dead. And that's even better than just Genovaing. Later on, as the game state got more kind of in my favor, I did consider that. On the turn that he actually Kusith back the wall, I actually thought he was going to Kusith back Genova, and I was going to Hecaton to prevent the 8K from resolving, for exactly the reason you were saying. But he ended up just picking a different route, um, which he had no choice to do because he wouldn't be able to cast Genova anyway because he had only 4 CP up and he had no hand. So I probably shouldn't have attacked. It's one of like only like 3 attacks I think I did the entire weekend, and I ended up getting bursted. But it ironically ended up working to my benefit because it was the last Ingus in his deck. So if he had drawn it, he would have been able to kind of pop off a lot more, because he would have been like, you can argue that like it doesn't really make a huge difference either way because it's like 1 CP. But I come on, buddy. Sorry. But yeah, so I thought that it really wasn't that big of a deal, but I do think the attack was a misplay.
Okay, so after destroying 2 model Earth decks that you were not favored against, what did you play against in your final match?
So the final match, Mike Powell on Refia, it was kind of funny because he had an inopportune start, but his inopportune start really messed up how I wanted to play the matchup. So my goal was to Rydia into Seymour, put Hecaton in hand, put Hecaton on top of my deck, and just keep trying to Hecaton his backups to make it difficult for him while I wait for Xset to become online. But he had to Luna Freya turn 1, and he ended up curving out really well on turn 3. But the problem was I couldn't put the Hecaton on top of my deck because the Luna Freya could just swing into it. So it actually became kind of weird. I ended up putting a Kusith on top of my deck, which also didn't feel great because on turn 2 he Tycooned for Lena. So I didn't really want to give him more card advantage for me to just recur like a random forward just for CP. Though you can make the argument that because I have 6 dark cards, that random card might be more valuable to me than the random card that he draws in case I'm starting to draw dark cards. But I got really lucky because he had a really, really hard time finding another Earth backup. And so it took him a long, long time to actually get there. And then when he finally got to all 4 colors, he had to go to basically pitch his whole hand except for one card, which was ended up being Warrior of Light because he searched it off of Tyro. I top decked for turn the other Hecaton and X-Death, which has got to be the meanest one I possibly could have gotten because I also had 5 backups and I had 2 of them as mannequins. So I just tapped all 5 backups and played both, and the game basically started to spiral from there. After that point, I ended up stealing his Cecil with Chaos, and then he couldn't do anything basically. And Lulu started to eat away all of the Refias before he could go to combat to get the trigger off. So it just kind of really started to go towards my favor because he started to top deck poorly, and I started to top deck amazingly.
Wait, how did you pick off people with Lulu?
Oh, I had like 2 summons in hand, so
Ah,
I just like double ping it, which like it seems bad to do, but if you think about it in the sense that like, oh, when you cast like a Hilder, you're paying 2 for deal 5k. I guess you get the drawback, but to pitch 2 cards from hand to kill a Refia, I think I would take that trade almost any day of the week, especially if one of them is a dark card.
fair. Okay, so
Um,
after you finished Swiss, you were 5-1 after losing your first game. I think you were,
yeah,
what was it, top 4 or top 5 seed or something like
I
that?
I ended up became relevant because it really prevented me from going first in almost any of my games. But day 2, I went into it having a suspicion that it was probably like now or never for this deck to show its legs because the way that the top cut ended up being is that none of the mono decks made it through, and there were no monster decks or like water lightning monsters specifically. I had a better matchup when you and I were testing again to fire water, but the so I was like, okay, this deck has to shine now or it's never gonna shine. And so I played against Scions, and I was a little bit nervous because round 1 of my first day, I lost 2 Scions. But I just kept telling myself, like, there's no way that this deck should not beat Scions between like Man in Black, Mist Dragon, and like Ixion can kill most of them, and Hecaton kills basically everything. So I was able to put that to reality on the first match. So that ended up being a 2-0. He decided to do something kind of cool with his playstyle where game 1, he basically just decided to do a normal Scions game, try to establish some backups, get Tataru online, crap like that. And then it ended up being that I was able to outvalue him once I got like Mist Dragon online. And then, or Dragon and then like Mana Blackout. And then game 2, he went full aggro. And turn 1, Graha Tiad for Alice to recur Y'shtola. I had Mist Dragon in hand, so I elected to Mist Dragon it because I was worried he was going to then haste one of them, attack, and then I would be put on a 2-turn counter of him being able to kill me, which I didn't think I'd actually be able to manage. But then I played like a backup 8-2 damage, and then I played 5 CP Hecaton and wiped his entire board. And because he kept having to pitch everything from hand to play any forwards, X-Death came online on like turn 6, and then it just ate his whole board away.
Yeah, I was watching that first series. It didn't really seem close, and uh, you just have way too many easy ways out when they go aggro. So yeah, it's a very poor matchup for any Scions, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was just like it was just like sometimes you'll lose bad matchups or like good matchups, and I think that's what happened day 1. I can't imagine that this deck doesn't pretty much stomp on Scions, but it was one of very very few meta decks that I did not practice against. Just like my second round, which was Will 7. um,
Oh, we can
this
pull
was
up that list actually. Yeah,
this was a cool.
let's pull it up.
So he ended up uh, he played really well. There was like one point. There was a really scuffed.
Oh, the fifth one, Lil Marcos.
Which, oh, there he is. Yeah, yeah. So this list I think is really cool, and I think it's a list that people should be experimenting more with in the current meta. There are certain cards that I think are like a little bit too niche that I'm not a personal fan of, though I'm sure like an experienced pilot would look at me like I'm an idiot for even mentioning it. Like I don't really understand Gentiana in a lot of matchups, but I get that she's like good where she's good. Um, and then obviously the Emperor is like extremely advertised for why he's there, but like into like Refia and stuff, it doesn't feel great because then you just like top deck or bottom deck it. But you should argue that like Refia's game plan, I guess, is more of like an aggro anyway. So I think that because I don't play this deck very much, I really don't think I should like talk on like individual merits. But I will say the things I was terrified of that he flipped every time. He flipped this stupid Zeromus every single time he played Wool 7. All 4 flips had this Zeromus in it, which was super annoying. Um, the way I went into this matchup was I thought having Mist Dragon should help never allow Gilgamesh to be online, and he never did get online throughout the entire series. And then also Hecaton 5 CP wipes basically everything except the Wool 7, which is also to an extent good because you don't really want them replaying a Wool 7 if you know you can deal with the board state that they develop without doing targeted removal. Um, but yeah, so I was like really terrified. There was one play also where he decided to go an aggro route, and it caused me to have such existential crisis because he picked a Zeromus and I think an ax like a Gentiana or something just to deal with like an aggro, and he skipped a Moody, so I couldn't figure out if he already had the Amat or not. So I spent like 3 minutes determining whether or not I should risk the Shantoto before I decided to just gamble it, and I fortunately was lucky enough to have him not have Shantoto. What are your thoughts on this list, man?
I've played against it in what was it, Dallas or Chicago? I think it's a solid list. Um, Not much to say about what it does, but I did lose to Gintiana because I forgot what she does. Basically, when I attack with my Ifrit into a Gintiana, when I deal damage, actually don't get the auto because he's now sideways and he loses abilities.
Oh, that's
So
so funny.
so that was one interaction I've never thought of because nobody plays Gintiana. The other thing I suspect it's there for is to counter Unidex, which, as Yuna is sideways, she's gonna lose her abilities, and Gintiana reads you can action dull something, so you can preemptively dull anything that they have. Maybe you can dull their Cecil out of the way so that you don't have to pay the taxes. You can dull Yuna, so then they'll have to waste all of their dull actions immediately, otherwise she'll lose it. I mean, there's a lot of use cases for it, but I'm not 100% sure what all of them are, so
I think that certain things that they got in the new set. So I think that one of the big things that it like similarly to the Earth Lightning deck was that it benefited from the existence of like other decks coming to fruition. Like the Unit deck gave certain of these cards reasons. Similarly to like the Earth Lightning deck, there's literally only one card that's new in the Earth Lightning deck, and there's literally only one card that's new in this deck, and it's this Barrelite, which is actually super good in this list. And this action ability has actually scared the shit out of me throughout the entirety of the time that I was playing against him. So I think I actually ended up hecatoning this because I was just too nervous to deal with it. Um, the only thing I wonder is if the if Sephiroth LB would have utility in here. But beyond that, I think the list is pretty good. Jeff, come here, buddy.
yeah. Okay, let's restart. So after you defeated the Wool 7 player, you were against Tori next. Can you tell us about what happened?
So Tori was the ultimate homie, and because we're teammates and we were really good friends, he ended up scooping to me, so that way neither of us had to play out. It probably would have been a horrible matchup for both parties involved. We speculated that it was probably favored for me, but we figured it would also probably take the full hour and a half, and we would both hate our lives to the end. And Tori had nothing to gain really from besides prizing from advancing. So he ended up deciding to just be really, really nice and allow me to proceed on to grands. And we had some burgers and onion rings or something between quarters and grands. It would have been an interesting matchup though, and Tori and I should play it like just for fun sometime, because I suspect it was probably favored for me because he runs like a million different colors. In addition to the fact that he doesn't have like the aggression that some of the other monster decks allow, like he doesn't have Furion or anything. So I don't actually know how he would deal any aggression at all. And he would definitely probably deck out because of the CP efficientness of like Realm and things like Blue Worm and stuff. But it's speculative. We don't know. And Tori is like, I've never beaten Tori in bracket either. So he's like my the bane of my existence. But he's also like the nicest guy in the world. So even though we both think it probably would be favored for me, it's hard to say.
Yeah, guess we'll never know until we play it.
Yeah. But then finals was like the actual test of the day, which was Yuna. and I played Adam Kassar, who was playing. I think this is exactly the Alex Hancock list, with the one really funny exception, which was he played a Shantoto LB because he couldn't find a second foil Mott, and he ended up actually casting this against JG and won his round one because of it, which is really funny.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, why is he playing Toto? It's not. It wasn't in the original list, but it ended up making it work. I'm surprised
Yeah,
that it didn't ran it actually. I
I
guess
don't
it,
see a reason to run two Mott because you don't swing really often until you're like pushing for lethal anyway. But
that's
he's
not exactly true because this version you're actually attacking quite often because you're not reoccurring value with the Theodore and Hooded Man where you're perpetually freezing down their targets. And Sophie really necessitates you to actually put on pressure by attacking. You're just poking whenever you can, and I guess to Matt, if you read the Alex Hancock essay, he did talk about needing to attack with Matt on the field quite often. So that's probably why there's two of them.
That's fair. It is a different list. I think that like to say put this in the exact same thing as the Eureka list is a little bit short sighted. Um, to an extent, though, I it's hard for me to really gauge. So you and I have played this matchup a lot, and we know that even though I think everyone in chat thought it was going to be a free victory, you and I both know that that's not really how our testing went. Um, it felt more like it was optimistically like a 40% win rate, and that's like a little optimistic for me. Um, but there are certain nuances like that. If I don't brick, I have really good action I can do pretty consistently. And I do have a lot of answers for a lot that the deck has. The way that Grands went, which was like, I say this endearingly because I love Adam, was a complete blowout. The reason it was like that was because I drew basically perfectly, and he drew like decently, but it was just not able to handle like what I had. So there was like a lot of times where I searched out. I actually didn't draw a backup, and then I ended up drawing Reeve, which was the best backup I could have searched out because then I found the Vincent for my turn two, and he played I think like Yuna, Rosa, Cecil, his turn two. And then I was like, okay, I shouldn't play the Vincent because it's gonna just not really be like CP efficient and all this. So what I ended up doing was I think I played Rydia and Seymour, and I searched out like Hecaton and Ixion or something like that. And then I was in a board state where I was able to Vincent and then hold it and then like hold the Ixion or the Hecaton until he cracked it. And then I played Hecaton and wiped his entire board, save for the Cecil that was currently not in the field.
Yeah, I think everyone in chat after witnessing the matchup, they probably would guess it would be lopsided for your deck, but it really isn't. I think several factors probably played into it. I think Adam was playing a little bit suboptimally. I was watching him make so many mistakes. Either one, in his head, he already had accepted defeat, or he was just playing super poorly because he was dreading this matchup. But in reality, I think when we play tested Yuna versus the Arc deck, Yuna is probably one of its worst matchups in all of the matchups we tested in. So
Like I think I mentioned at one point or another, the big reason why I took the deck was not because I think that it is like the tier one destroys everything. There's no competition. The reason I took it was because I thought this can win, though. With that being said, that does not mean it destroys everything. It doesn't. I didn't go into the weekend with any like 0% win rates like matchups. You know what I mean? And so I was like in circumstances like at the end of the day where I think Adam was also a little bit resolved because we played the exact same matchup actually at Toy Wiz, but albeit he was on the Eureka list, and that was kind of a wash as well. I think Adam just got in his mind that this is probably a terrible matchup, and the way that the matchup ended up going was terrible. Like I drew everything perfectly, um, and like you were saying, maybe there were some like inoptimal plays, but I don't think that the inoptimal plays really would have affected very much in the grand scheme of things based on how I drew and everything. But I think that like to just immediately go like if you go and you take this exact list and you go to an LQ and you're playing against 15 unit players, I would not be surprised if you came in dead last.
Yeah. Okay, so now that you've secured your Worlds invite, are you attending any more events later in the year besides that?
Definitely going to Raleigh. Probably maybe going to Portland. I have to see how expensive flights are. I want to go because I love playing the game. That's like honestly like one of the biggest things. I love playing FFTCG, and so I kind of want to go just to compete. That's actually why I ended up going to Canada. I actually was working that night. I was supposed to be, and I traded shifts just because I wanted to be able to go to one Materia Cup while on the current Opus because I was felt like I had so much fun building decks and testing for the Opus. I didn't want to like let all this testing go for just the LQs. Like that, it's not a waste. I still got my qualification at PAX and at Toy Wiz, but I wanted to like on the big stage. And then Nats obviously, and then here's hoping good things for Worlds. I'm really excited, and it's a really big privilege to be able to go to Worlds and rep like the Gamers Command people and be able to hang out Tori and hopefully hang out with other people like yourself or like Sam and everyone else with the gang at Worlds. Hopefully more people qualify. And then even the people that have already qualified, I don't like talk to everyone on a regular basis, but like everyone else that has qualified also seems super, super nice. So I'm excited to be able to hang out with them and hopefully we can bring home North America's first Worlds win.
Yeah, that's an ambitious goal, and I hope we can do it. All right.
Yeah, we got twice.
All right. Any last words before we wrap up?
Not really. Sorry if my dog was barking at different points during the video. I think he's he's getting triggered by the fact that I've not hung out with him in the last like hour and a half while we've been talking.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining today's session with our latest Materia Cup winner. Stay subscribed, and you'll see more content related to FFTCG from our team. All right, until next time.